Guys, welcome to our annual state aid legislation update webinar. Plus, today we're going to give you a brief 24-25 FAFSA update. My name is Jason C. My colleague Tim Phelps is with me. I am going to now share the PowerPoint share. Let's blow this up. And Tim, I'm actually going to turn it over to you to start talking about what changes we have coming down.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jason, for having me on the webinar today. Appreciate the invitation to speak with everyone, provide a legislative update for the session that ended about 3 weeks ago. I do want to quickly say thanks to Jason and his staff. They do an amazing job. Appreciate all of their work, all of their efforts. So always good to talk with you all as well. So my update will be fairly brief as far as any prepared comments. We only had 3 bills that were directly related to state financial aid programs. One other bill did pass that covers a new program which would provide funding to physicians in residency training. Like I said, I'll get to that a little bit later. So Jason mentioned earlier that it's been about a year. And so this time last year, we were discussing a bill, the Hope Expansion Bill, that made a lot of changes to lottery funded programs. Those included increasing the Hope Scholarship, making several changes to the dual enrollment grant. One of those changes that was discussed included a change that would have allowed students who graduate with remaining Hope eligibility to use the award toward an advanced degree. However, that amendment didn't make it into that bill last year or into the final version. And it's funny because I looked at my notes from a year ago and I made a note that I had a feeling this amendment or that amendment would be back in a future session. Well, fast forward a year later and we have House Bill 27, Senate Bill 74. And like it says there, it allows students to use the Hope Award towards the attainment of an advanced degree. Really, and the simplified version of the bill is that it changes the terminating events for the Hope Scholarship. You can use the award until you have earned an advanced degree or 5 years have passed from your date of initial enrollment as a Hope Scholarship student. The bill currently does not define what is an advanced degree. So that's something that we'll be looking into defining when we dive into the rulemaking process.
Pause just for a second. No, Tim, this is good. I think this is exciting. I mean, since guys, most of y'all know Tim and I, we joined THEC back in 2006, I think months apart from one another. I think this is something that from a school counseling perspective, I've had counselors over the years say, wouldn't it be cool? So we finally gotten it. Yeah. I mean, it's 17 years in the making for you and I, but it finally, quote, got it that this is now here.
Definitely. And to your point, Jason, there's been a lot of conversation over the last few years about this. And I think there have been many constituents, students, parents who have said exactly this scenario is that, hey, I'm graduating. I'm not able to use the full amount of my Hope Scholarship for 4 years, 5 years, what have you. So this allows them to do that even when they get their bachelor's degree early and then move on towards a master's degree in most cases. So, yeah.
So, counselors, college access professionals, we may have a few financial aid administrators on as well. This again, it's now 5 years or an advanced degree, whichever occurs first. Mm-hmm. So we'll move on.
Yep. So the next bill allows private colleges to charge dual enrollment students tuition and fees above the dual enrollment grant. So if your high school or your school district works with a private college or private colleges to offer dual enrollment courses, then I would encourage you to reach out to the dual enrollment grant coordinator to see if there will be any type of increase in the cost to students and parents. Now, I say that I've had conversations with a private college representative, and my understanding is that there were really 1 or 2 schools that were driving this bill, if you will, but that most of the private colleges don't have any plans to change or charge more. But there could be, like I said, one or two that were out there who were the impetus for the legislation. So definitely if your school or your school district is working with private colleges, then I would have that discussion sooner rather than later. So.
Yeah. And guys, just as you're listening to Tim and just looking at the slide as well, just kind of as a reminder, what you see award amount wise is what a student can receive for doing enrollment grants 1 through 5, specifically at a 2-year, 4-year, I guess now public college. And then as a reminder, once a student starts getting into grants 6 through 10, they're $100 a credit hour. Tim, I think it's important, while I always love this update, is also for us to just kind of remind some counselors, you alluded to it earlier, the expansion bill last year. As a reminder, guys, TCAT dual enrollment, kind of its own separate, can I say, strand now, where a student beginning as early as 9th grade can use the dual enrollment grant for up to 1,296 clock hours. And that is separate from what you see here in terms of grants, 1 through 10, and what can be used at a 2-year or 4-year institution.
Yep. And I somewhat glossed over, and you make a great point, Jason. I glossed over the fact that we had some changes to the dual enrollment grant, but obviously we went from 4 free courses to 5 free courses. We expanded the TCAT dual enrollment to all the way to freshmen in high school. My favorite piece of that legislation, as far as the dual enrollment grant last year, was that we removed the borrowing provision. So that has put money obviously back in students' and parents' pockets as well. But just a few reminder of some of those changes that we made for the current year.
Yeah, and the other question that over the last few days, some of the outreach staff, myself included, has received, as well as Jan has received, kind of as a reminder about grants 1 through 5. We use the example of that 538.65, what a school can certify for a 3-hour course. But folks, if you do have a student that's enrolled in a 4 or a 5 or even a 6-hour course, there is, that student would get that course paid for if they're using grants 1 through 5 at a 2-year, 4-year college. Tim, I think that was one of those that can I say, maybe I slept on last year and forgot about that. And Jana, thankfully, our colleague Jana McCall, who does a great job administering our dual enrollment grant, she always reminds us to say, hey, no, if you are using grant 2 at Nashville State, for example, and it's a 5-hour course, that there is a 5-hour amount that Nashville State would certify in order for that student to go tuition free for that particular dual enrollment course.
Yeah.
Just want to throw that in there.
Yeah. And to add on top of that, I think most of and I forget, maybe it's in the 95 to 95% range or something, but I think I've heard 95% of the courses that students take through dual enrollment are gen ed courses.
Yes.
So the majority are going to be that 3-hour course, but that 2 or 3%, 4%, 5%, what have you, could be a 4-hour, 5-hour course. So yes, you're exactly right, is that we would pay up to that amount for that course. So,
all right, next slide.
So the House Bill 432, Senate Bill 1220 creates a new program, essentially a teacher loan forgiveness program, which would be available to juniors and seniors who are enrolled in an educator preparation program. The award would be up to tuition and fees after deducting gift aid. Gift aid, for purposes of this program, it's the same that we use for lottery programs, or the same that we use for Promise, Reconnect, and so forth. But it is, or includes, lottery funds, TSAA, and then the Pell Grant. Recipients who receive this award would be required to teach in a targeted setting for each year that they receive the award. And that targeted setting is currently defined as a Tennessee public school in a distressed county or at-risk county, or a subject there is a critical shortage. And both of those would be determined by the Department of Education, like it says there. I will say, just as a side conversation, so our agency has been trying to get out of the loan forgiveness business, if you will. We've wound down a couple of similar programs in the last couple of years. This program is similar to one of those programs that went away. Like it says there, it is a 5-year pilot program. So this would be through the 27-28 academic year. It is intended to start with the 23-24 academic year. We will have to see how we can get it up and running as quickly as we can. We've already started the drafting of the rules for the program, but it's going to be a challenge for us to get the word out on this and to get it going. So, but again, loan forgiveness program, the one benefit to this program, there's no interest that would be charged to these students. That's unlike some of the other programs that we have or that we've had in the past.
So no, this is good. And again, for a lot of our high school personnel listening, as you see on the slide, as Tim said, again, this is for college juniors and seniors. And again, this is going to begin immediately here, this 23-24 academic year. To your point about the loan forgiveness aspect of it, right? So in other words, if I'm at a school and because it pays tuition and fees, and I know it's last dollar, but work with me here.
Yeah.
If I am, receiving $5,000 from this program, if I go on to teach in that quote targeted setting school for each year I've received it, essentially this program was free money. It was a scholarship I received. The loan aspect of it is if I fail to do that. And so at that point, if quote, I received $5,000 from it, there's zero interest, I would just have to repay that $5,000. If that 1 year, for example, I chose not to, I received it, but chose never to teach in a targeted setting area.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I apologize thinking that everyone knows loan forgiveness programs. So yes, I'm glad you explained that further. Again, it's similar to some of the programs. We have a program like this for minority students as well that we have retained, and we've modified that program to make it more towards juniors and seniors. And really the benefit of doing that is that those students obviously at that point should know what they want to study. They're in an education program. Some of the programs we've had in the past would make the award to freshmen, sophomores in college. And those students obviously at some point decide, I don't want to teach anymore. So interest would be piled on top of that. So yes. So thank you for that clarification that, yeah, you're going to have to provide that teaching service. And if you don't, then you're required to repay that amount.
Guys, as I'm thinking through it, probably like Tim sitting here thinking through it in real time, folks. I mean, we are sharing this information with you, but guys, this is as fresh to us as it is to you guys listening to maybe this for the first time and thinking about, let's say we had, you and I, a son or daughter that was going into their junior year. Maybe they were interested in becoming a teacher, and so they were enrolled in one of these education preparation programs. In terms of the definition of the target setting, I'm assuming as that gets ironed out, like you said, at-risk distressed counties, and or a critical shortage area.
Yeah.
So, for example, and I don't know this, folks, but like if physics is a critical shortage teaching area in high school, right? Then potentially that's what I could then go and teach at any school in the state. I assume at some point in time that information perhaps will be given to whether it is the education department at that school or the college, so that a student or parent, a professional that asks could identify here are your possibilities of where you could go teach and use and do this.
Yeah, I foresee a list essentially that, and either that we would post it on our website or that we would refer to have a link to the Department of Education's website that says here are the critical shortage areas or here are distressed or at-risk counties, since they're making that determination. But one way or the other, we would have that information linked.
Cool.
So
awesome. All right.
And then the final bill, this creates a program, and understanding that these students would be maybe some of your former students, but students down the line. But the final bill, House Bill 1281, Senate Bill 781, creates a program that'll be administered by the Department of Health, which will provide funding to physicians in residency training to help repay any educational loans. The recipient does have to agree to practice in a health resource shortage area as determined by the Department of Health. And like it says there, it's up to $40,000 per year for a maximum of 5 years. I mentioned this program, like I said, you may have former students who are wanting to pursue a career in medicine, possibly reach out to their counselors. I'm not sure how often they go back, but I think it's at least worth mentioning to the counselors, and if just in case, hey, it happens to come up in conversation or at any conferences or anything like that. So
that's good. No, it's good information, guys. As you see, again, this is not going to be administered by us, by THEC. This is being administered by the Department of Health. I'd say through our contacts with them as they get this up off the ground, they'll share some more information to us that, like Tim said, we potentially can share with you guys as we learn more from them.
Yeah, and so we have reached out to the Department of Health and asked for a contact person who would be administering this program. So if there's anyone that needs some additional information from this, I'm more than happy to give out my email. They can contact me, and when I get that information, pass it along to them. So, but you can email me at Tim. There you go. Jason's a step ahead of me as usual. So, but feel free to email me, call me, either one. But happy to pass that information along when I get it. So,
Tim, as always, thank you. Tim's going to stick by my side for a little bit. He's going to sit here and endure my FAFSA conversation for a few minutes. That being said, as we're in this presentation mode right now, there may be questions coming in. We'll go back and look at those at the conclusion of my section of the presentation. So that said, let's start talking about this 24-25 FAFSA. I guess it was now mid-February. I think we received communication from federal student aid that the 24-25 FAFSA would not be opening in October, as we have become accustomed to. Instead, it would become available, quote, at some point December 2023. I know some of my friends and colleagues on here right now have listened to me, or you and I have had, say, private conversations where I've been asked him, Jason, when do you think FAFSA will open? And my gut is I think they'll open it up during the holidays. And so that being said, I think we should all enjoy the holidays and just focus on potentially FAFSA work beginning in January. Now, if something comes out where they open up December 1st, then obviously we will navigate that. But knowing the calendar of a high school, going to December into that holiday mode, I think most professionals, college access professionals, school counselors, et cetera, I think most of us should just commit to the mindset of this FAFSA is going to open up in January, and that's when we will, be helping families with the 24-25 FAFSA. Now, just like in other years, this FAFSA will be based upon prior tax information, which in this case for 24-25, that will be the 2022 income and tax information of students and of families. So that information, that tax information that the majority of us perhaps filed here in the last month with IRS, that's what will be used on the 24-25 FAFSA. The expected family contribution, the EFC formula, it is being replaced by apparently what's referred to as the Student Aid Index, or the SAI. More about that in just a bit. And then I believe it was on Monday, the decision was finally made internally that for Tennessee Promise, and purposes, and also TSAA consideration, that our deadline related to those specific programs in the 24-25 FAFSA would be next April 15th, 2024. Now, Tim, again, I'm not a CPA. My mom and dad taught me long ago to try to get my taxes in as early as possible after the calendar, after the new year or whatever, as opposed to waiting to the deadline. But that said, that may or may not coincide with actually tax day, which is,
It'll be close.
It'll be close.
Yeah. And I think that was part of our decision-making process is aligning that with, hey, the tax deadline, FAFSA deadline, at least for in our discussions. And you probably know we polled the high school counselors, we polled the financial aid community, and really April 15th was the most popular choice. And I think everybody thought that's reasonable enough. May felt like too far out. April 1 felt a little too early. So it was just April 15th, and let's align it with the IRS.
Now, so again, for 24-25 FAFSA purposes, as it relates to promise and TSCA, April 15th will be that deadline. So to me, 2 slides worth of changes, not just a ton of information, because let me be clear. I did this presentation a few weeks ago at a conference, and I joked with my co-presenter at the time, Tim, that I should have had a GIF or a picture or something that says, stay calm. As you listen to me, stay calm, because it is one of those things that all of us probably viewing this right now, we've all read the same information. I am a visual learner where none of this truly makes sense until I see it. I will say, I'm honored. I am going to a conference in July where hopefully I do get a hands-on experience. So me sharing that with you, and there may be others on this call or this webinar who perhaps you're going to be attending that same in-person training. But that being said, and this is one that the U.S. Department of Education is hosting in Washington, D.C. But my hope is that we do have something hands-on that and I'm speaking for myself, can see that puts these words that I'm about ready to utter or that you're reading right now, that helps me understand this better. That being said, so one thing that we've heard and read is this 24-25 FAFSA is going to be, quote, role-based. And some of you, as I say that, you're like, Jason, isn't it already role-based, right? Because sections 1, 2, and 3 is about the student, 4 and 5 is about the parent, section 6 is about the student. Well, yeah, but understand that's always been one seamless application. The way I've heard this role-based FAFSA idea is if my high school senior, for example, is completing their student section of the FAFSA as it relates to the 24-25 FAFSA, that when FAFSA determines that, hey, this student needs their parent information, that at some point the student is going to enter their parent's email address, and now that parent and the parent spouse will be sent a link to complete the parent section of the FAFSA. So that is what it seems like is being said or being communicated in all this information. And so, guys, just think about that. If I'm at a Hunters Lane High School and we're completing a section of the student, I'm anticipating that at some certain point that student is going to enter mom or dad's email address, and then they're going to check their email, hopefully in a few minutes, right? And click on this link that will then give them access to like the parent section of quote unquote Jason's FAFSA. So that's one thing that, to me, at least on the surface, seems like a pretty significant change in the sense of that parents that we work with will need to access potentially an email and wait on a secure link. And, I've got folks right now listing that, perhaps their parents like yourself as a professional, Tim and I, right? We're used to emails, but folks, as many of us know, there are, areas of the state and also, folks here within Nashville where Tim and I are sitting right now that, parents don't have any use for email. So that might be something that as we learn more and more about this 24-25 FAFSA, that who knows, I've joked somewhat, we may have to have an email creation workshop for some of our parents, just to get them prepared for this. Also, with the 24-25 FAFSA, for those of us that work with students whose parents perhaps do not have Social Security numbers, signature pages are going away, which as I heard that, I said, hallelujah, right? No more signature page. However, these parents will now be able to get an FSC ID. So somehow, some way, our parents who we work with that don't have Social Security numbers will now need to create their FSA ID in order to electronically sign the FAFSA. One just thought about this is, sometimes these parents perhaps are somewhat resistant of providing their information. So just kind of heads up, this will be a new requirement, not only for those of us that have Social Security numbers that we need to create an FSC ID, but again, parents without Social Security numbers will now be asked to create an FSC ID because again, the signature page is going away. IRS DDX, the Direct Data Exchange, is supposedly going to replace the IRS data retrieval tool. In reading about this, we're now, some of us have frustration with the IRS data retrieval tool and the fact that we use our FSA ID. I'm saying from a parent perspective, you use your FSA ID, you connect with IRS, and then it's your turn to enter your address exactly as it appeared on that 1040 from, in this case, meaning the 23-24 FAFSA, the 2021 tax year, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? For those that doesn't work, it frustrates us. We get that. From what I understand here is, now the parents and also students who file taxes in 2022, they're just going to use this DDX to basically provide consent for the IRS to share information with the FAFSA. Now, to be clear, this is how I've interpreted what I have read and also heard from other presenters talking about the 24-25 FAFSA. So again, as we see this, maybe this looks more like the DRT, but in my mind, it looks a little bit different, where maybe the parent or student who's trying to enter their tax information simply provides consent, and then magically everything connects without some of the other barriers and steps that the data retrieval tool has presented in the past. Now, one comment about consent, and this is something that Tim, myself, and all of our colleagues who attended our financial aid conference here a few weeks ago, our TASFA conference, one thing that we heard a presenter say is, guys, the tax info and the consent, that is something that can be revoked. And so what that means is, a parent who potentially has a disagreement with a student, let's say they have begun college, and all of a sudden that parent decides to go in and revoke their consent, what that potentially may mean is this student may lose financial aid eligibility for certain programs. And so, as speaking broadly for the financial aid community, including us here at THEC, I think we walked away from that conference to say, all right, well, we're going to have to develop perhaps some rules around, well, what happens if a parent revokes consent as it pertains to the Hope Scholarship or Promise. So that's something, Tim, not to say put words or out there or whatever, but I think that's something as we learn more and more about this, and if and when we do feel it necessary to create rule and stuff, we'll obviously share anything that changes out regarding that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, obviously the FAFSA is the application for most of our programs. And when we get into this process where there's a revocation of that consent to share that information, then that puts a hindrance to us in our ability to make an award to a student, whether that's Hope or whether that Hope, if it's one of the supplemental awards, or whether it's our TSAA, our state need-based grant. So it'll be something that we'll absolutely have for consideration and discussion.
Yeah. And guys, again, as you listen to this, hopefully you respect the fact that I'm sharing changes with you. And I'm also, sharing kind of pros and cons with these changes, right? So anyways.
And I think it's important to mention as well, Jason, that we're working off of information that we currently have. And that's not to say that that's not going to change between now and December. So it's really, here's what we know at this point. Stay tuned. If we get updated information, obviously, like Jason mentioned, we will pass that along. But we're in the same boat as you guys. We're passing this information along, but it's what we know at this time.
And I would encourage, and I think many of us work in this mindset of, any webinar that you see, say from the U.S. Department of Education, from, if anyone's partners with, SACAC, NASFA, SASFA, any of the acronyms of professional organizations that, whether you are a school counselor, a college access professional, a financial aid administrator, by all means, tune into these webinars to see how all this evolves between now and ideally it's opening at some point in December. I think the only other slide regarding the 24-25 FAFSA that again, folks, that I felt was relevant for today's webinar, and again, this is me putting these slides together, is just to talk just briefly about the shift from EFC to SAI and the formula change, and specifically, Tim, I'm going to get a little nerdy here in terms of the formula change. For years, FAFSA has put out a EFC formula guide where any of us could hand calculate the expected family contribution based upon, the parent, students, tax information, household information, assets, etc. With the replacement of EFC by SAI, a couple of things that are changing within the formula. One is the number in college is being removed. And this is something that the conference, the SACAC conference that I alluded to earlier that I was honored to speak at, this is one thing that I heard from the school counselors there that, Jason, this is a pretty big deal for some of our families, who have multiple students in college, that where that number in college is factored in to determining that financial need, whether that means that student becomes Pell eligible or that student simply becomes eligible for, additional institutional aid based upon need. The removal of that number in college could be a pretty big deal for some families. Tim raises his hand. Tim says perhaps his family, having 3 kids is his family including. So that's something I wanted to share. Also, Tim, where you and I are from, originally and growing up, around folks that whether our parents or grandparents farmed or, our friends' families farmed, for years from an asset perspective, the value of the family farm on the FAFSA was a moot point. Value of a small business was a moot point. However, now the values of such farms and also small businesses will now be considered an asset. So in other words, when we get to that parent asset screen of the FAFSA and it asks, again, this is me assuming what it's still going to ask, do your current assets exceed a certain dollar amount? Now included in that definition will be the consideration of the value of a family farm and small businesses. So again, locally, thinking about our farmers up in, say, Robertson County, Now those students at Joe Burns High School, for example, or Greenbrier High School, just to use those two high schools as example, as my colleague Dustin Rawls works with those families, now it will be coaching them to say, all right, do you have a family farm? If so, let's kind of consider a value of it as we answer that question.
Read an article actually the other day that was talking about this very issue, and I'm going to probably get the phrase wrong, but it was something to the effect of the families that have a larger farm, you're land rich, but yet you're money poor. And so I think in the past they've obviously just taken into consideration the money that's generated from that family farm, but now all of that goes into the calculation, which doesn't paint a true picture of what the ability of that family is to pay for college.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And then finally, for now, there's not going to be a Pell chart and a table. And folks, I know specifically some of our team here have really gotten into this. Shout out to Erica and Felicia and Lori if they're listening right now. I know at TASFA we were really going into scenarios of, so what does it mean if your SAI is negative 1,500 versus if it's this amount? And guys, I said to them, I'm just not there and I'm not ready yet. So as a school counselor, if you're taking this in, I don't mean to speak broadly for school counselors, but Tim, I think for them and a lot of our colleagues, when we're helping a student and a family complete the FAFSA, we're just relying upon that FAFSA at the very end when you hit submit for it to tell us how much that estimated Pell Award is, right? I think for the majority of us, even though I could share a Pell Grant chart with you, most of us don't use that. That's more of a financial aid administrator thing. But just FY, for any of you out there that do and have become accustomed to using a Pell Grant chart to determine Pell Grant eligibility based upon EFC, right now that's going away. And so I think for the majority of us to actually learn what the student's eligibility for Pell will be is by us reviewing the student aid report of the student, through their FAFSA account to see what their estimated award will be after they submit the 24-25 FAFSA. So though that concludes kind of the SAI formula changes that I felt was relevant to this audience. And that being said, as always, that's my contact information. I'm going to stop sharing the slides. Looks like we have a few questions. Oh, Jackie asked privately, I want to turn the camera on. Not that you have to see Tim and I, but here's Tim and I. One person says, will we receive a copy of slides? Yes, and this is being recorded. Because there is also we're doing the webinar about Hope Scholarship GPA verification on Monday. My colleague Suzette Telly and I will be doing that. My thought is we will record that, and then once that recording is ready, perhaps as early as Monday afternoon, we will then send an email out with both the recording of this webinar and Monday's webinar and any slides there. So Jackie, there you go. Yeah, so Abigail, you asked to clarify, quote, they will be removing the signature page option. That is what we've read, and that's what we were heard at TASFA there as well, is that the signature page option was being removed, which again, pros and cons. In one sense, that's good. And it's good in terms of, like this morning, I worked with two students that have previously submitted paper signature pages back in January that still haven't processed. So this morning I was helping them print a new one, sign a new one, get that mailed off, right? So a pro is that moving forward, parents that have to go that route will now simply sign electronically with their FSC ID. To me, the con in the removal of the signature page is, are there more parents that perhaps become concerned because they're having to create an FSA ID and not just using a signature page. So that's kind of the con version of that. Catherine asked, have we heard anything about timing for when they might have a worksheet available so families can start prepping before they release the new form? Tim, I know you just shook your head. You may be right. You may be right. There was a timeline that was shared that I feel like perhaps in the email that I shared back in mid-February, kind of letting them know of the opening in December, I feel like I may have placed a hyperlink. So when you receive that email from your outreach specialist, whether that's me or someone else from a team, kind of feel like we put a hyperlink on the suggested timeline of stuff. But Catherine, if you will, email me. And again, this could be one of those things I just blast out altogether later. But I'll share the timeline the FSA sent that had like different aspects.
And you were thinking it included a worksheet?
Yeah. It was a lot of timeline information.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it could have been.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim may be absolutely right. It may not have been said, but yeah, Catherine, email me and I'll forward you that link to see. That being said, assuming it wasn't on there, or assuming they used the broad fall 2023 in terms of when the worksheet, typically last few years with the October opening, they typically have done the worksheet in, say, September, so like the month before. So ideally, if we are going with this December opening, I'm hopeful that sometime in November we get the worksheet. So, all right, more questions. If parents can sign without an FSID, will that be an option for students? Yeah, Brooke, that's going to be a good question in terms of, to me, what it looks like. When you have those FSAID issues, right, where a student creates or a parent has created their FSAID, and let's say they changed email addresses or changed phone numbers, and that was the importance this year of copying down what was referred to as the backup code, where that's kind of the quote get out of jail free card, where you could use that to potentially reset your information, connect your FSAID. Brooke, it could be where, as always, we need to have that 1-800-4FED-AID number on speed dial, because, when you and I are unable to help a student or navigate FSAID issues, right, our last resort is call actually FAFSA, again, 1-800-4FED-AID. 433-3243 is what that spells out. So anyways, Brooke, stay tuned to that. Like I said, hopefully that July training that I receive, hopefully I come back full of information that then can help answer questions like you just presented there. All right, Amanda asks, if the IRS DDX tool, yes, that is what it's called. I'm actually very proud you've already got the acronym down. If it doesn't work, will families still be able to input their information? I'm just thinking about how fake the DRT has been for us. Amanda, no, amen to that. All I can say is I assume that is the case, that if for some reason DDX does not work, that you will be able to manually input. Again, Amanda, I assume. That said, Tim, yesterday their FAFSA actually held a webinar for school counselors, college access professionals about working with students who are homeless or unaccompanied youth. It was a really good webinar, folks, that FAFSA actually held, Federal Student Aid. That being said, one of their outreach folks talked a little bit about the 24-25 FAFSA and about the DDX. And the comment was made, even for our non-filers who typically we say, right, not going to file, and if they didn't work, $0 earned, and then FAFSA typically will say, do you want to skip questions? The comment was made that even for our non-tax filers, so parents that, again, are unemployed, or maybe parents that are disabled and have no reason to file taxes because they did not work, that they will still even use the DDX with their FSAID so that the IRS can somehow verify with FAFSA that, in fact, let's say Jason, who did not work for whatever reason, 2022, was not required to file taxes. So apparently, Amanda, everyone's going to have to use DDX. Now, what that actually looks like, as I shared earlier, I'm thinking it's going to be different than what we know DRT to be now. But again, hopefully I'll know more come July. Yeah, Karen, great question. Have you heard anything about how parents without socials will create the FSCID? And Karen, I have not heard anything about that. That's something that we have talked about a little bit in terms of wonder what the process will be. I know, for some parents, they have tax ID numbers, which folks, if you ever are working with a parent that has a 1040 and you see in the social line, they have a number that begins with a 9, that's a tax identification number. I do wonder for those parents if they'll just use that. Yeah. But then what about those that truly don't have any number at all? Karen, again, that's something I hope to learn, and we learn between now and January. Terry, will they offer a demo site? Terry, similar to that other question, about the worksheet, let me go back to that timeline because I think the demo site also was mentioned in addition to the worksheet. But again, it could have been just that broad, available fall 2023. So Terry, the demo site, similar to the worksheet, I feel like the last couple of years, please push back, but I feel like it's typically come out in September or launched in September. I'm with you. I mean, for all of us, all of us, Tim, that's my sandbox when the demo site comes out and opens and stuff. So Terry, let me go back to that timeline look. Deborah, great question. What would be best practice for assisting December grads if the window doesn't open until, again, at some point in December or January? Deborah, this is a great question. I mean, I think one best practice just off the top of my head is, if we're having a FAFSA workshop, forgive me, if you are having a FAFSA workshop to potentially invite those December grads back to help with the FAFSA, selfishly thinking about, THEC, our colleague James Snyder, our Tennessee Promise Director, now for the last couple of years, we've utilized the information from Promise application, emails, text to blast out, FAFSA resources, including our FAFSA, section by section videos that we've been recording for some years. So, Deborah, all those resources will be updated and available through us, and we'll definitely share. But just thinking from a practitioner perspective, I think one thought is if that FAFSA, let's say it does open during the holidays when we're all out on break, I think one best practice is, hey, make sure you perhaps have good contact information as a school for those students so that you invite them back to any workshop in January potentially. That's just me off the cuff answering that. Yeah, Jeffrey, good question. Will students who do not work and earn income be required to use DDX? Based upon what the representative from FAFSA indicated yesterday, that again, any user that did not file taxes will use DDX, is what the FAFSA rep said yesterday during their webinar. So Jeffrey, yes, I think that is what they're saying, is that student will use their FSCID in some way, somehow, use the DDX, whatever that looks like. And again, you and I, and I know you work closely with Felicia, we're going to all learn this together. I mean, I think that's the key. Tim alluded to earlier, guys, we are all learning this at the same time together. So there you go. Erica, you ask any thoughts or feedback on how the change may affect FAFSA, renewal FAFSA applications. That's something I've not really heard touched on that much about renewal applications. And maybe I've, I helped someone earlier with a renewal application, but kind of day in and day out, year in and year out, and speaking for my team specifically, I think we're accustomed to always doing that new FAFSA, right, as opposed to helping most students with a renewal. But Eric, I don't recall anything from TASFA, anything about renewal FAFSA.
It makes me wonder if the first year there will be no renewals, and with everything, and then from the second year renewals potentially. So I don't know.
I think for any of you that are watching this right now and listening to us, and we're about to wrap up here. Some of you that perhaps have been on other FAFSA calls, you might be like, Jason, why aren't you communicating, the significant drop in the number of questions on the FAFSA? Frankly, folks, I think that's semantics. Them saying that they're going from X number to Y number. I think it's semantics a little bit. And I'm not saying that derogatorily. I'm just saying that I think for all of us that help students with the FAFSA, it's still going to be the FAFSA in terms of there's going to be barriers, there's going to be obstacles, and there's going to be frustration. And as I've said, Tim, kind of weekly, as I'm talking to people about the FAFSA, my one hope is above all else, they just fix the system itself because of how glitchy it can be certain times of the year, especially when you get close to state aid deadlines, right? Like for us, again, April 15th will be for 24-25, but last couple of years been March 1st. Folks, Tennessee is not the only state in the United States that has a March 1 priority deadline. And I think that's why oftentimes when you get into late February and you have parents and students pulling their hair out because FAFSA is not working, or you and I pulling our hair out because FAFSA is not working, unfortunately, it's because there are literally millions of folks trying to get their FAFSA in the last minute. So,
and it's frustrating for the parents who are legitimately trying throughout the month of January, February, and running into, like you say, those technical issues versus the student or parent who just completely waits until the last minute. And I know you have worked way more with students and parents in the situation where they go back and they go back and they go back, and there's still those. That's the frustrating piece. Obviously, you want to help any student or parent, regardless of when they're applying, even if it's at the last minute. But it just reinforces the message that you need to do it as soon as possible, and versus waiting until the last minute.
No, amen. I think that's a good place to end right there. Tim, fist bump. Yep. Some people, for recording purposes, fist bump. I like that. Hey, I'd be remiss, thinking about this weekend, Mother's Day coming up. So all moms out there, God bless you. Happy Mother's Day. I'll be going to see my mom this weekend and my wife's mom as well. So happy Mother's Day to everyone. I hope you learned something from Tim and I today. If you have any questions, reach out to us or reach out to your outreach specialist. And hopefully I see many of you on Monday during the Hope GPA verification webinar. Again, these will be recorded, slides and everything will be sent out combined, hopefully Monday afternoon, but no later than Tuesday. So that being said, guys, have a great weekend and see you next time.
Thank you all.